I have to say it's my first interview, so I'll let you guys kind of dictate if anyone wants to start or questions.
Yeah.
Have you seen the piece yet or a photograph of it?
We saw a photo,
Yeah.
Okay.
but we're not sure if it's the actual one that you've installed or if it was a previous
Okay.
image.
What was it a photo of?
It was a house.
A house. that is
you
the
with
main.
a very large beard.
I know. My sister made me shave it for her graduation. No, I showed up at her graduation with that last year.
Yeah.
And she said, I know you're an artist, but this is so not cool. This is so not cool. She's like, we have photos, you have to meet my friends, so.
You have to meet my friends.
Since then.
That's a generous movie made.
Yeah, it is the same piece. The show's titled House Painter.
Yes.
It is literally a house made out of paintings, so it got its name from that. But then it's also, I know growing up, I grew up in a small town in Virginia, right, kind of small town. And if I told anyone I was a painter rather than an artist, then they typically would say, oh, you mean a house painter? So it's kind of a mixture of, I think, the title of a high and low, you know, it's kind of a faux pas or looked down upon if you're a house painter. But then I know quite a few painters throughout history. De Kooning is probably one of the most famous house painters. And I think just technically you learn certain tricks of the trade doing house painting. You use different types of brushes, you know, it's a whole different thing, but you cover surfaces larger. And I've actually taken some of my experience there, I think, towards painting. So it's kind of a mixture of all that.
And so is that sort of where you're interested in using these materials, like you say, from like the mega stores, because a lot of the big hardware stores and that kind of thing, using these kind of new kind of materials for your works as well? Sort of that kind of connection, this is?
I just like painting.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think the main thing that, I don't know, maybe separates me from other artists or other painters, especially in New York right now, is a lot of people, especially coming out of a graduate school type of tradition, really quickly you're told, who are you, what do you want to do, what's your style, what's your niche, what part of the market do you want to be a part of? And I think that's kind of a limiting approach. I just really like painting, so I try to follow my intuition. One day in the studio, I feel a little more realistic, and I love Renaissance painting, so I try to draw and it's a little more technical. Another day, if I'm upset or emotional or have had a fight with a girlfriend or whatever, then it becomes more abstract. I like plein air painting, and I think that's kind of a cheesy, it's considered cheesy Sunday painter type of activity. And I think I like it just for that reason alone, and it's fun. And you can travel around with your easel, and I've found that I've done it in pretty much every country I've traveled in now. So recently, well, a year ago I was in Vietnam, and that had a huge impact on me. And it was the first place, this place called Sapa in Vietnam. It was super mountainous, and it was the first place in the world I've gone to that didn't have private property. So in America, if I'm trying to paint, you know, you're like, wow, what a beautiful waterfall. But then you have to knock on the guy's front door. You've got to get permission. You get chased off with a gun in America if you're trespassing. And there, I had free reign of the whole entire mountain valley. And I could just go set up wherever I wanted. And it was extremely liberating. So that was nice. But the main thing, I don't speak Vietnamese, and they don't speak the best English, especially in this town. So we would just kind of sit there and look at each other. And then as soon as I brought out an easel and started painting, you know, people gathered around, we started communicating visually. It kind of bridged cultures, bridged societies, I found. I really like it. So that kind of has opened up a new dimension to painting for me. So I try to just do it all. I try to paint in the studio, I try to paint outside, I try to paint abstraction, I try to paint figurative, I try to paint portraits. And then I guess the more artistic part is curating it and trying to figure out a new way to put it all together.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about when you decided to make your paintings into a house and about that process?
I had the idea actually when I graduated from Hunter College, got an MFA there in 2005. So 2004, basically, people that were moving out rolled their paintings and then threw all their stretchers away downstairs. So I had a year left, had a large studio, and I basically collected probably 60 stretchers. And so I had all these stretchers, and I started arranging them, trying to figure out what I could do with them, and putting them together. I was like, wow, I can make a house. But at that point, I didn't have enough paintings. And then graduating, I didn't have enough time to figure out how to do it for my thesis show. So the idea percolated, and every year for about 6 years, I was like, wow, I want to make a house out of paintings. And I either didn't have the paintings, I didn't have the money to do it, I didn't have the space to build it. And 6 years later, I'd done 2 residencies. I came back to my studio with way too many paintings. I went through a kind of prolific, I would think kind of late Picasso-y stage where I started painting really, really quickly. And I just had way too many paintings. So I felt like I wasn't painting as much as I was building shelves in my studio trying to figure out how to store them. And at that point I was just like, you know, kind of screw it, let's figure out how to put them together. So to me it's a very long process, but then painting wise, like right now if I tried, I have enough paintings I think to make probably 1 or 2 more, which would be fun. I don't want to do it right away, but having that long length of time, if I made the paintings, if I said I want to make a house and then now I need to make paintings for the house, it's much too rational and the paintings come out looking the same. So because I had enough time for those paintings to develop separate from the idea, I think the variety of paintings is much, much greater than if I had said I want to do a house and then spend a year trying to make paintings for it. So one painting goes back to when I was 19. Most of them are in the last 6 years from graduating. But there's really, honestly, a little bit of everything. And then my favorite thing about the house for me, as an artist, was it taught me to be completely unsentimental with my work. So, you know, you do a painting, you're like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever done, and I love it. And then you really just can't do that and build the house because you have to, I can tell you why I flipped them around, but you had to start screwing them together. You had to possibly, I've chopped edge corners off to put them together and kind of puzzle them together. So if you think it's the best painting you've ever done, you're not going to be able to allow yourself to do that. So that really changed my understanding of painting from something that was precious, something that was an individual masterpiece or the individual expression of a total expression of you in one thing, to much more of a building material. And I think the house kind of suits as a building material too. So it's just like you would put wood together, you would put bricks together. It's just another material that you can like build things out of.
Do you feel like you now put less value on the individual paintings and rather you put more value on the sort of collective whole of the house now?
Yeah. See, conceptually, I never wanted to be pigeonholed as a history painter or a portrait painter, so I never conceptually wanted to, but I would put so much energy into a single painting and say, this painting has to completely define me, and it has to be perfect. But yeah, I think it's not necessarily about the whole, or it's more about the whole made up of parts. One part is never going to fully express you. And art historically, I think, as when I was 19, I got to see the Picasso Museum in France, in Paris, and that had a big impact on me because walking through, like I thought I knew who Picasso was in kind of a 19-year-old understanding of art history, and I thought it was Cubism and analytic Cubism, and it was all brown and gray. So walking in, it was like you got the pink room, you got the blue room, then you got some ceramic stuff, then you got sculptural stuff, then you got Cubists, then you got late Cubists, then you got the wonky old, dirty old man paintings. And by the time you get through, it's not about any one style, it's just about painting, and it's about self-expression and the totality of self-expression arcing through and curving through someone's life. So now I just allow myself to try to be open to that and not to try to be too predetermined. And because in the past I made these large history paintings, and to do one of those you basically have to do a lot of drawings, preliminary drawings, come up with an idea, and then every day you have to go into the studio, take a few deep breaths and say, now I have to get back into the same mental framework. I have to approach it the same way. I have to continue doing this, and it's much more of an almost an endurance exercise. And now, yeah, I just go into the studio and every day try to react with the emotion or the intuitive nature that I am experiencing that day. And then over a 3-month period of time, like a larger picture, an overarching picture, starts bringing together all the each little day's activities into something bigger. So I find it really liberating to work that way. And I find that it's a little more open, it's a little more creative, it's open to chance, you're not as in control. And painting, my favorite thing about painting psychologically is, it sounds like art therapy or something, but you never know why you're doing it right away. But I've become a little better at being in tune with it, so I'll pick an image and it's really just, oh, I like that image, I want to paint it. And then 2 days later, after looking at it, after having drawn it, then it dawns on you like, wow, that's what I've been dealing with emotionally, or that's what I've been thinking about, and how strange that I picked this image. And it seems, and when that happens, it's kind of this euphoric, eureka moment that's really fun. And it teaches me a little bit about my life, and then I think my life definitely influences the work. So that kind of self-discovery aspect of it, I find I really like. And if I do it well enough, if I remove myself and my ego enough from it, then I feel like other people relate to that, because we all have similar experiences. We're really not that different. So if I remove my ego and stop telling myself, oh, you're a great painter and this is going to be the best thing you've ever made, and remove it and just talk about something that you're experiencing, I think other people relate to it more. So that's been a new kind of discovery too.
So just
I'm going to have a little water, sorry.
We had kind of a preliminary discussion before we got here, and we were reading your artist statement.
Okay.
And you were talking about kind of these ideas of sustainability and this issue of storage. I mean, this is kind of tangential, but do you think that the creation of the house, I mean, you kind of said this already, it was a way for you to deal with all of these paintings, but does it have any link to what maybe you would your ideas of sustainability are, or this like, kind of like almost recycled image?
Yeah, I definitely do like recycling. You know, it's like we're all told that it's a good thing, and so I've actually tried to take it into my art practice a little bit.
Okay.
Sustainability is hard. I don't know, honestly, I don't know how to be sustainable. So I want to be sustainable, I want to help the environment, I want to live a little bit more of a sustainable lifestyle. But then going to the art supply store, I was told that, and this is in Bushwick in my neighborhood, they used to buy American canvas, but America doesn't produce canvas anymore, and if they do produce it, it's too expensive. So they buy canvas from India, put it on shipping containers, ship it to America. They buy their wood from Canada now because they can't buy cheap enough wood in America. So the stretchers from Canada, the canvases from India, the gessos from Thailand or somewhere else. And then when I think of what I make and what materialistic objects I make and fill the world with, and then I think of how many artists I know and how much they make, and then you find out that, you know, every museum only like 80% of their collection's in storage. And then as an art handler going to collectors' houses, I know how much they have in storage. I started to become aware, like, maybe it's not even the best thing to keep making stuff. You know, like I make stuff because I feel the need to, and I think it's important, but then if we all just keep making stuff and making stuff and making stuff, all we're doing is using up resources, and I don't know the answer to that. But it weighed on me for a second. But then, I don't know, you don't come up with an answer, so you just keep doing it. It could be, you know, we all want to have like a lighter global footprint, but then at the same time, painting does serve a purpose and still bridging people together, opening you up to new ideas. There's a certain poeticness, I think, visually. I'm more of a visual person, so the poeticness of poetry, I get just as much of that visually. And I think it's changed me as a person. It's made me a better person. So that alone is probably a good thing for me. And then if I can do that and maybe influence or help a couple more people in similar ways, then, you know, maybe it's worth the canvas from India. I don't know.
But when you travel, this is just a quick question, do you try to buy kind of local things to paint with? Or do you bring your own?
Well, I always get a few local things and try to experiment with them. Paint quality differs a ton, and it's a lot easier to paint with acrylic when you're traveling just because of the airport regulations now. And acrylic paint, I don't know why, you have to buy a certain quality of paint or else the pigment medium ratio just is horrible and the paint doesn't even like really apply. So, but I always try to kind of communicate. I guess the local thing comes more out of, I do have kind of a tendency to buy local dress and garb, and I just find like local clothing really interesting, especially in like India and Vietnam. I just couldn't get over the clothes they made. And that influenced my palette, and that influenced my sense of design, kind of like Matisse in Morocco or something. Like that's what I kept thinking about when the first time I came across some Indian outfits that in Rajasthan they had mirrors attached to their clothing. And I remember being on the street, and the street's kind of dusty, and it looked, at the very end of my perception, it looked like a disco ball was coming at me. And I honestly just couldn't figure out what was coming at me. And I had a moment of fear, like thinking, is it an elephant, is it a car, is it a truck? And then as they got closer, I was like, oh my God, it's a group of women, and they have mirrors on their clothes. But it was kind of beautiful. So stuff like that. So I bought one of those outfits.
So do you think that, sort of saying all of that, going back to the sustainability, that you might move away from painting on canvas, or do you think you'll always be a painter on traditional kind of canvas?
Yeah, my work has always been about painting, but more about a romantic notion of what painting is. And then the thing that I continually try to do to maybe contemporize painting is to experiment with materials. So I did a whole series of paintings on pink styrofoam and blue styrofoam, and that was kind of like, it was the history painting, this like highbrow notion of art history, but then the lowbrow materiality. And if you try to paint, you know, a really political painting, and you paint it on like Belgium linen, then there's a pretentiousness that it has. But if you paint it on pink styrofoam, just pink will allow you to get away with such stronger imagery. So knowing my work and seeing the trajectory that it's taken so far, there's always a material play. And depending on, but the materials change and the types of painting change, but it's always kind of mix and matching. And I think the hardest thing for me is balancing notions of what is historically important. I don't know, my mom's little voice in her head that she likes things that are cute and beautiful, and then contemporary art that want this avant-garde kind of bad boy ironic thing. So it's being true to my contemporary world and art market stuff that does affect me, and my education with an MFA, but also kind of bridging this historically, to actually, I am a pretty good draftsman and I can draw really well and I like drawing really well. But you can't do just that, because then it kind of, I could be a really good portrait painter in Times Square basically, but that doesn't like completely satisfy me. And then,
so would you maybe say you feel under a little bit of pressure to sort of convey those sort of political, social issues that other contemporary artists are dealing with?
Well, it's a fascinating, let's go on a tangent for a second with, it blew my mind when I found out that the CIA was partly involved with the support of abstract expressionism. And one of the reasons I read that they got involved with abstraction rather than social realism was because they wouldn't have any political fallout. So if they supported a painter you know, like a Mexican muralist or something, then all of a sudden, whoa, maybe he's painting something that's, you know, people would relate to and it's against the government. So they liked abstraction, kind of like American jazz, because there would never be any political ramifications from the imagery. And when I heard that, like, but I grew up being told, you know, you can paint realistically, but to be a contemporary artist, I don't know how many professors, you know, kind of tried to veer me away from that. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like we do have to kind of pick that back up a little bit. How to go about doing it's a little tricky, though, because talking with any discussion with politics, if your opinion comes across too strong and you feel like the discussion's over, you know, if I'm like, I'm right, you're wrong, then basically the discussion's over. So you can visually be way too heavy-handed with your political ideas, too, to the point where, you know, you don't want to look at it if you don't agree. So it's tricky. And then another friend said it's probably the best thing the CIA's ever done, because imagine the world without, you know, abstract expressionism. And I agree too, you know, with that. So I don't know, I'm a Gemini. I don't think I'm ever completely happy. You know, I flip-flop a little bit. So I do like painting abstractly, but then I get tired of it, honestly, a little quickly, and I like painting realistically, but I get tired of that. So it's honestly trying to kind of balance my own interests. But then it gets cheesy, I think, and kind of juxtapose magazine if you do something like a portrait really realistically and then it fades into some abstract mark making. Like, I don't know, that's not my cup of tea either. So it's more about the conceptualization and the context and how you frame stuff, I think, now that, you know, with the institutional critique and stuff, we're very aware of how things get framed. So I think that's more it than anything.
Something I was curious about asking. So you sort of created this structure within the space of the gallery, and was that sort of like a conscious like statement on like the space of the white cube and that environment, an attempt to sort of remove yourself from?
Well, it's interesting. I think it looks better here than it did in New York,
Okay.
specifically because it's glass, and rather than having like a New York City street in front, there's actually a few trees. So you can stand on the front porch of my little mountain cottage and look at trees, and I love that. I absolutely love that. So I'm not institutionally critiquing the gallery space, but I do think a house inside of a house kind of looks cool, or a house inside of a gallery kind of looks cool, or a space inside of a space. I didn't think initially I wasn't going to turn it into a studio. Initially, you know, I thought of a mountain cottage. So then inside of a mountain cottage, what do you have? You have a little cot, or you have a little sink, or. But then as soon as I started playing around with that, once the structure was built, it seemed way too theatrical or narrative. It seemed like I was holding on to the initial narrative too much. And basically in my studio, I only had about 3 feet around the house after I built it. And I got really antsy and just wanted to paint again, so I just started painting in it. And honestly, that was my favorite moment, because then I realized if you're inside, the light shined through the canvas, and I'd never really looked at paintings from the back, but you can see it's not stained glass, but it's kind of stained glassy. And it dawned on me that I was painting inside of my paintings, and that's when the kind of eureka moment happened, where it really felt like my subconscious mind had influenced 6 years of work, and I'd done them all randomly. I never thought that they would be put together. And then I'm inside, my subconscious painting brain had like materialized around me in the form of a house. And then I'm inside of it making new work. And it felt just like, you know, a kid's fort or something. It felt really safe. There's a security thing there. And whenever you're painting, there's always moments where you're like, I suck, this isn't coming out good. And that kind of evaporates a little bit, because you're like, oh, I thought that when I painted that one. And then, oh yeah, I remember struggling painting that one. And well, this one's it just makes each one a little bit easier, being reminded of the trials and tribulations of all the paintings, you know, that you're inside of or surrounded by. So that's when it became really, I didn't expect, none of that fit the conceptual framework in making it. So that was a huge surprise to me, and that kind of that really encouraged me that at that point I knew I really liked it. I thought maybe it said something more about painting that I didn't even realize, and that's when I started painting in it a bunch, and that's when I decided to do the performance at Martos Gallery for the month, to use it as a studio, and then that's why I'm doing it now.
And the work that you create in the house, does it have like a particular, I mean, I understand that the paintings you do are pretty far reaching, but is it kind of like more thematic because you're inside of your previously painted space, or do you think it still has this like sense of like automatic painting?
Yeah, I've gotten good at, I've been doing it for about 3 years, the more intuitive stuff, and so now I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah, so it's not like I'm in this house and it's already been influenced by these ideas. You can still just come in every day and just...
Well, and the ideas are so varied, it's hard for me to kind of think that I'm supposed to have one idea when I'm in there. Because if I'm in there, I've got paintings of girlfriends, ex-girlfriends on it, paintings of places I've been on it, abstractions, a painting of Occupy Wall Street on it. So there is it's more about a life experience. It's like a diary.
Okay.
So if you open your diary, you're not like, oh, I'm supposed to write a certain way. You just kind of intuitively write about your day and what you're experiencing.
I find it interesting that you mentioned Occupy Wall Street, because when I was thinking about your act of making a house and taking up space, I really thought about the parallel of occupying a space as a political act. Oh. Is that something that like you consider with your use of space? I mean, you're now moving, it's no longer like a formal concept just within a work of art, but an actual space.
That's a beautiful idea. No, I hadn't thought of that.
No? Okay.
I went to Occupy a lot and I really liked it, but no, I did a painting of it as soon as I came back from it the first time I went down there. And I couldn't find a good painting of American occupier police presence online, so there's a British one. British police officers wear slightly different uniforms, so maybe you recognize it. But yeah, no, I hadn't thought about occupying the house as an Occupy Wall Street type of connection. That's nice.
And going back, going back to the fact of like childhood, like between like these things about the house and painting inside the house. We were talking yesterday about this thing that at least me, when I was a child, I used to be like to create one of these houses and paint inside, or write my diary. Yes,
nice.
Of course. And it was my space, so I didn't let my parents go in.
Okay.
So, and when I finished my work, I let them go in and show my work. So. I don't know, I think that is like kind of like the individual against the collective, no? Like this relation with person and the collective.
Sure.
But nowadays that we have different ways of communication, for example, like new technologies or social network, how do you feel that your work can be inside this new way of communication between you and the others?
Well, I do bring my laptop in and listen to the radio. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit of a Luddite, so technologically, I think I'm probably 5-10 years behind. You're all maybe a little younger.
You have your website and you have your like. You have uploaded your stuff in there.
A friend helped me set that up, and I'm very thankful. Yeah, that I do have it. I don't know. No, I do think it's important, but I think to me it's a distraction. I am on Facebook and stuff, but it's a kind of a split. You have to think about how you represent yourself digitally, how you represent yourself in the real world, how I represent myself artistically, like right now to you in person, how I represent myself artistically online, and I would rather just do it in person or paint, but it is a necessary thing now. So I don't know, but I'm not the type, probably someone else a little bit more in tune would have set up a webcam and be live streaming out of it. Technologically, I'm just not quite as caught up.
Yeah, actually it's interesting the fact that a house is where we all have our privacy. It's like a private place. But at the same time nowadays with these technologies, we are available to like have a communication with all the others. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a not a contradiction, but like both of the.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you're using
That's
the
true.
house as like a place where you are like alone, or maybe not alone. I don't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like these different houses like create like a society in a way. So
Mhm.
different ideas put together.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. Huh. Maybe the next one I'll have to, yeah, do something along those
like
lines.
these links between
Yeah.
one and the others.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, now I feel like just my iPhone and my computer in there is like, wow, I've got technology and painting side by side.
How do you feel about people sort of reacting with your work? Do you feel kind of private when you're in there, or do you welcome people coming in, or
Oh, yeah.
because there's so many personal things in the paintings, do you?
No, my favorite thing is I have these 3 windows, and people often come in and like put their arm on the window and look in, and I don't know why. It's comforting. It's nice. They seem to enjoy it, and rather than look at a work of art and stand back and be prim and proper and stuff like that, or you know, they actually interact with it a little bit more, and it seems comfortable, and they do it in a comfortable way. It's like they enjoy just kind of leaning on it.
Yeah.
Where someone else, you know, if you do touch something, it's a little more, the house just doesn't make you feel that way. And I think I have done certain things to kind of make that happen, or to bring that forth. You know, I think a front porch, being from Virginia, every house had a front porch and a back porch and a little veranda and stuff like that. So I find that very homey. And I really like in this space, it goes right up to the ceiling. But in New York, I actually had a little bit more of a platform, which made it kind of look country-ish, where it's raised up a little bit and you have to step up to get onto the front porch. But here I've chopped the floor in half and it basically hits the ceiling. But yeah, the windows, you're totally allowed to come in. And the house, thinking in Spanish, mi casa, su casa, my house is your house, has gotten my brain to now kind of say mi Picasso, su Picasso, or mi Picasso, tu Picasso. And I think that's kind of hilarious. So that's my favorite new little saying, but that's come out of just like saying, come in, welcome, you know, be part of it.
Do you think that kind of stemmed from your original work on plein air and having people kind of watching you and getting
Yeah, yeah, that really helped. Because we have personal private space, and they just do not, they do not have that, or they don't regard that as important. So I remember the first day, yeah, I could paint in front of people, but typically it would be more of an art school setting where you're painting with your peers and there's a professor looking over your shoulder. And then in New York, studio space is hard to come by and stuff, so my studio mate actually walks through my space, and that, you know, whatever I used to think was an invasion of privacy, and I've gotten used to that. And then going to Vietnam the first time, I set up my easel, and I swear there's like 25 men, women, and they're like, one guy's touching my pocket because he's interested in my cell phone, another person's picking up paint out of the little cupboard in the easel. They're right up close to it, and you know, I froze, and I basically had to make a mental decision. I either have a nervous breakdown and pack this up and walk away, or I deal with it. And it got easier and easier, and now, yeah, now I don't really mind as much. It's still, oops, it's a little bit of both. You can really let loose, you know, kind of later at night, especially if you're working on something larger. You know, you turn up the music, it's nighttime, you're not even looking out the window. There's kind of like I feel like there's a veil between me and the world. And intuitively and subconsciously, I feel like that's when a lot of new things happen in my paintings. But if I'm doing something I'm comfortable with doing, like I really don't, if I'm frustrated and the painting's not coming out, like I'd prefer you not watching me go through that. But if I'm painting something I kind of feel comfortable with, or a landscape, I don't know, I feel like it's fine.
So is the house almost like a psychological, not necessarily experiment, but test for you almost, to put yourself kind of in this not necessarily uncomfortable, but unconventional situation to create what sounds like incredibly personal paintings, to allow people to watch you like experience whatever emotion you may be going through.
Yeah. I didn't actually think people would be interested in me painting inside of it. When I think of an art performance, I think of like someone naked, screaming, breaking glass, squirting ketchup, you know, eating sausages. So when I think of you guys being kind of, I don't know if you are or not, but if someone's interested in me painting, like I'm like, well, really? It's going to be boring. But people actually have responded to that almost equally as they've responded to the house itself as an object. So people kept asking, why don't you paint it more? I came by the show at Martos and you were at lunch and I didn't get to see you painting, and that's the reason why I came, so I'm gonna have to come back. And I'm like, well, you saw the house, you really want to see me just sitting at a desk, you know, doodling? But, and here, you know, I didn't necessarily propose the idea of painting at the opening. You know, I wanted to paint in the house a little bit before the opening, kind of break it in, get a little paint splatters, put some new paintings on the inside. I knew I wanted to paint something that related to Reggio here, because there's all these outside things that relate to the outside world, but on the inside I thought something should relate to this space. But yeah, everyone keeps encouraging me to paint in the house.
Well, I think
Sorry.
I mean, I just think in terms of, like we were kind of talking about earlier, like the kind of the sterile art space and viewing art with your hands behind your back, behind a line, that you've just created this new space for the viewer, not only by creating the structure, but by allowing them to see the creation of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, we haven't quite seen this yet, but I think we're all interested because it's like seeing the entire process in one blow. It's like you get to see the materials created, and having this discussion with you, know the like idea behind the creation, and then see the product. So it's kind of like enabling this viewing experience that you, for the most part, are never going to encounter when you go to a museum or a gallery and look at a previously produced work.
No, that's true. I actually, I don't like ending things either, so it's like I get a little sad when the painting's done and then I can't work on it anymore. So this actually allows me not to have to say it's over. I can't touch anymore. It's like I can go in, probably after the interview today, I painted a little yesterday, so I'm gonna go in and wash my brushes, get set up for tonight. So I'm still kind of a part of it. I'm still kind of using it a little bit. I'm still kind of an artist a little bit. It's not like, oh, my art is separate and now I have to put on a suit and, you know, do something else. So I like that. And when I really like a piece of something that I've done, or the best stuff that I've done, I think it's a little bit harder to classify, and that's when I'm really, really happy with it. Like, is it painting? It's not really a painting. It's about painting. It's not really architecture. It's kind of architecture. It's kind of a space within a space. It's kind of a performance. What does it say about painting? It's even harder to I don't honestly 100% know. What type of painting is it promoting? You know, that blurs the line there a little bit. So that's when I feel like everyone who looks at it or everyone who experiences it will get something out of it. And it's not me making a presumption that this is what I have to tell you about painting and this is what you have to get out of it. And if you don't get what I get out of it, then it's, you know. So it's a little bit more open, and honestly, that's why I like it. And I try to do that in the studio, even if I'm doing a singular painting. If it's too much one thing and I can look at it and immediately kind of sum it up, then I have to do something to it too. Maybe just experiment, because that's the fun of painting too, is when you do something and you're not 100% sure what it actually is, or if it's good or if it's bad. It makes me think, and it keeps me active, and it keeps me on my toes, and it keeps me reacting to it. And that's the kind of joy of, you know, reacting to it, where if you do something, you know it's 100% good or it's 100% something, then your job's over. And then what do you do? Go have a coffee and then you're like, I'm going to do the exact same thing over again. And that to me seems like an office job. So I'm not really interested in that. So yeah, it's more the openness. And I didn't think it would work, honestly, to be completely honest. I've screwed paintings together before, And my idea was to try to make a larger wall out of paintings that I would then paint back on top of. And I've done that, so I knew I could screw paintings together and that they would support each other, support the weight, or it would work. But I honestly didn't really know if I could make a house. And then I forgot to mention another realization I had when making it. Initially, I started with the back wall and the front wall, and initially I made all the paintings vertically, like in correct orientation. So you would have a portrait next to a landscape, next to another portrait or something, and basically your mind would try to read it like hieroglyphics, and your mind would want some master narrative, like why is this person next to this landscape, next to this car, next to this? And you would get kind of frustrated because you wanted a narrative to present itself and it wasn't really happening. So then as soon as I started twisting them, some were upside down, some were sideways, some were right side up, then it became just more of a visual experience, and that completely opened it up. And I was actually frustrated and didn't think it would work there for a day or two. And then as soon as I started experimenting with that, then it just became about, it's like a visual kaleidoscope. And then it became an experiment. How much random stuff can I put next to each other and you still can actually read it, or it's not so obnoxious that you don't want to look at it? And so that was an experiment. So the house, anyone who's done basic carpentry, you can build that in a day. The construction, that's not very hard. But then it took about 4 months, 3.5, 4 months to basically curate. So I had shelves of paintings, and I would just take a painting and basically spin it around and hold it next to paintings and see, oh, does it look better next to that? Does it look better next to this? Colors matter. You can't put too many blues or too many reds together. If I had too many portraits next to it, then it started looking like a portrait house. So it became kind of fun, and it became an experiment to try to do something text-based, something abstract, something portrait or realistic. And if you can kind of get a happy mixture of those together, then it retained openness enough that you could look at it and your mind wouldn't immediately go to certain decisions. And then your mind would meander a little bit more through the visual nature of stuff. So that did take the longest. And I didn't think that would take so long. But I have plenty of portraits, self-portraits, and portraits of friends that I've done kind of late at night. And few self-portraits where I've been drinking alcohol. And if I had one of those right on the front, then it instantaneously became the Unabomber, like house in the woods, and it had this like terrorist feeling to it, like immediately. So that was the hardest thing to do, was to try to keep it happy, but not have it cheesy or too bright colored, have enough variety. Because paintings, you don't even know it, but they elicit emotions, and the images elicit emotions. And if we're looking at each other's face, the frown goes up, smile goes, or if frown goes down, smile goes up. If these things flare, if your eyes squint, we immediately respond to that emotionally. And if you had a few paintings that I think they're good paintings, but they're like emotionally kind of intense, if that's right on the front of the house, you'd walk up and you're like, I don't know if I want to go in that house. Like, who is this guy? And it really changes it quick. So yeah, that was definitely the longest part of it. But it was fun. That was a fun part too. Yeah, because every painting I have emotional response to, and it elicits memories. And so it's kind of, going through your diary, going through old photo albums, remembering stuff. It was fun.
It seems a lot like you're really trying to resist definitions and categories, like you're breaking down painting and architecture, and you were talking a lot about how you're using some text-based works, but then you're mixing the direction of everything. Like, is there a reason that you're trying to keep it so open, or trying to resist these definitions within your work?
It may have been just a little rebellious to a definition. Well, and painting-wise, if I'm painting and I don't know necessarily exactly what I'm doing, to me, it's really fun. As soon as I become immediately conscious of what I'm doing, like let's say I can work on a series and I can make probably up to 10, 12 paintings in a style or in a series. And then as soon as I become confident in the approach and I know how to technically go through the steps, it becomes boring. It becomes really boring. So personally, I just don't necessarily fit in. I don't know what my style is. And then there's so many categories now, like kind of bums me out that everything is categorizable to the point where we look at so much art, we go around to so much art, and it gives us a sense of confidence and it gives our ego a little kick. You walk in, you're like, ooh, this is minimalism from 1960s, and ooh, this is second generational abstraction. And that's how we take in the show. And we don't actually look at the work as much anymore. We don't even go to the back of the gallery and see the back room. We know it, we sum it up, we categorize it, we feel good about our knowledge, and then we go take in another show. And we just go around Chelsea or go around wherever and categorize stuff. And then, so I feel like I've heard that the average viewer looks at a painting for like 5 seconds or 7 seconds or whatever. So if you can't categorize it, you know, then you're going to spend a little bit more time with it. If you can't categorize it, then that's typically when I live with I think about it after looking at it. If I can categorize it, it's categorized, it's filed away, and I can go about my day and that thought doesn't bubble up. If I can't categorize it, then I look at it. I might like it, might not like it immediately, but I'm definitely on the subway ride home, walking around at the bar later, you know, I'm like, huh, what was that? And I still can't quite put my finger on it. And that's when I live with thoughts more. So it's not necessarily anything against someone. If you can sum it up, I'm happy for you, that's awesome. But it doesn't excite me as much when I can. So if I can't sum up my own work, then I'm kind of more excited about it. And I want to get back to the studio and try to figure it out, and that's why I do it.
What do you feel like is sort of next? Because you were talking about this process and how you don't like things ending. Do you feel like maybe the house is the beginning of a new project, and you may, if you make some sort of incredible tower block of houses or something, I don't know. What do you feel like is going to happen?
Tower of Babel. Well, in relation to the house, I really want to make an outhouse. I don't know if everyone knows what an outhouse is, but in Virginia we have little toilets outside before indoor plumbing. So I think it would relate. It would be really easy. It wouldn't take up my whole studio. And a few people have asked, could I put that outside? So the outhouse idea would be to build it out of traditional building material on the outside, so it could actually go outside and take weather. And then if you happen to go in and use a commode, then you would be surrounded by my paintings, and I think it'd be really funny. And it mixes the high and low again, and talks about Duchamp's urinal maybe, or I don't know, stuff like that. And and in Virginia, in the outhouse, no one uses it anymore, but it's cute. Now people take photographs of the little moon, the little, crescent moon on the door, and it's kind of reminiscent to a, bygone era. And then maybe in the future, if the house and the outhouse were ever shown together, they would totally relate, and I think it would be really cute. So that's maybe the next building idea. But the thing that the house has taught me is more collage. So there's a few drawings in there that basically now I have a few ideas. You take a larger canvas, you paint on the canvas, but then you do a portrait painting, you do a landscape painting, and you just cut it out and boom, stamp it, just put it right on. So you have multiple images within one image. And I would have never been able to do that before because I would have been too sentimental about the one. So even if I was doing a larger painting and I wanted to do a portrait in the painting, I might do a study on a separate canvas, and then I would try to reproduce a study so that initial canvas would still be homogeneous. But the main thing the house has taught me is painting terms is positive and negative space. So typically, if you were painting me, you would paint me and then you would paint this separate. This would be the background. But the amazing thing is if this is already, like, you can take anything, you can take a landscape and put it behind me, paint me on top of it to the point where the positive and negative get blurred a little bit. So then you would never rationally, let's say a tree's behind me, you would never rationally paint branches in my cheek. But if you painted my nose and my eye and those branches showed through, then the negative space is entering the positive in a way that you could never conceptually, rationally do. You have to be open to the chance of painting on something strange for that to happen. And that to me is just, completely new. And I think we all live in a super saturated visual world. We constantly are just oversaturated with all this stuff. And I think it's our job maybe, or it's our generation's, we have to filter this stuff somehow. And, you know, if you pull up a web page, it's just layer after layer of information. And it's somehow layering all that stuff together that I find really interesting now. And the house helped me, but the house is still individual paintings next to each other. And I want to figure out on larger canvases how to put them all together onto one, so that you have all these different ideas and different layers and different techniques, but in one painting. So I have a few good ideas, I think, for the new big ones. And now that I have my studio back, you know, I've got 2 20-foot long walls, so yeah, I'll have a few big paintings hopefully if we meet again.
Would you ever put, since the outhouse could theoretically be functional and outdoors, would you ever have your house kind of just an outdoor structure that was livable?
Yeah, see, that's, at first I didn't think of that. I was, you know, I'm like in my studio, why would I have to think about something I'm making, you know, be functional outdoors? But now, yeah, it's not tricky. The paintings could hold up for a certain amount of time outside, but basically you would just have to flip it a little bit, I think, and do, rather than have the paintings outside and the structure bare on the inside, you just flip it, and you could have the structure be more structurally sound on the outside and just wall to ceiling paintings, you know, on the inside. So that would be the easiest way. Otherwise you'd have to figure out basically how to do some type of clear protective coating so that stuff can take rain and weather. Because oil paint resists water. It would take a while for it to completely break down, but the stretcher bars, stuff like that would start to warp, depending on the climate, maybe in the desert, I don't know. But yeah, I would love to figure that out, honestly. Oops.
Have you done any experimentation with house paint?
Yeah, sure. Just as a painting, painting with it?
As a painting material.
Yeah, it's definitely younger. You know, when you first find out about Pollock, you know, Pollock makes drip paintings, and de Kooning did house paint. There's one on there. The one that's the oldest is when I first found out about Tapias. So, you know, I found out that, whoa, painting can have all this texture. And I was an undergraduate, I think I was 19, so I found train tracks. I put wet house paint on it, and then I put rocks on the painting. So I'll point that one out, but that was me like, whoa, it's a whole new experience of painting tapias. But yeah, if you don't have anything to use, then house paint's great. It really is. It's fine. It doesn't quite. You can totally mix color. You can do things with oil paint that you really can't do with anything else. And acrylic's great because it dries so quick, but oil paint I still feel is preferred. Just, you can turpentine it away, it's more malleable, you can keep changing it. It'll change with your ideas, where everything else you have to basically, it dries and then you have to layer it. And what happens with the surface is the more time you layer stuff up, you get each mark starts showing through, and the surface doesn't look quite as fresh and quite as clean. It looks like you've changed your mind a bunch, which is fine, you know, but if you want that nice, fresh, clean surface, you can change your mind as much as you want with oil and still retain the vivid brightness, like it was super spontaneous and it just happened. Where everything else, it doesn't look like it just happened, it looks like you struggled. And struggle's good, but you don't, you know. Honestly, I'm a fan of Hockney, and working at Pace Gallery, I got to work with him. And he, for 2 weeks, and he gave me awesome advice where basically you paint all day, and then at the end of the day, when you've hit that wall and you're not quite sure what the next move is to like really finish it up, you take a digital photo of the painting, then you print off 5 or 6 copies, you go home and have dinner, and with your after dinner drink, you basically draw on the photocopies, and you draw 5 different variations of, you know, what you might want to do or what you do. And then you wake up the next morning and you're looking at the 5 and you're like, oh, that's the best. And then you can actually spontaneously do it right away. But spontaneity, everyone thinks the painting just happens right away, but you really do have to kind of plan it a little bit. So that's a great way. You can draw right on top of the colored. So you're looking right at your painting, altering it without like necessarily, you know, you can make a sketch, but the sketch is still on white paper. It doesn't totally relate. So I just think it's a really quick, easy way. And it's, you know, it's using technology, but it's super easy. So I've been doing that, and that's really fun. So I think that's I'm really happy you told me that.
You just mentioned that that was the way of using technology, and we all had a chance to read your artist statement, which you chose to handwrite. Can you talk about like why you chose to handwrite the statement? Was that a deliberate act, or other than typing it?
I just don't like Word and formatting. But I think I have a pretty good script. I wish it printed a little better. It looks a little fuzzy. But the original, you know, was about that big, and I printed out the original in New York. Honestly, graphic designer friends have helped influence that. You know, a few friends have helped me make postcards over the years, and I always think, ooh, I don't really, you know, I can use Photoshop and stuff, and let's make it like really crisp and clean, and let's make it look like, you know, Coca-Cola advertisement, and just like, and they always say, you know, you're an artist, you have a really good hand, I can't do what you can do, so write it out, let's see your hand, and that'll make it more unique, or that'll make it more you, or that's something someone else can't reproduce. And at first I wouldn't have gone that way. I thought it was supposed to look, you know, corporate and flashy, but at the same time we like live with our resume, and we kind of business card resume. Galleries look kind of corporate and sterile, so everything I can do and use my hand and not follow that kind of, I don't know, yeah, representation of yourself in this very word formatted, clean way. Now, actually, any time I can, I'll jump at that opportunity. But yeah, I used to, you know, when you write, you don't really trust your hand, but it's your hand. And that's one thing, painting in a lot of different styles, that I tell myself now, is you can't escape your own hand. So even if you, as an artist, want to be super realistic or super expressive or whatever, or you think, I want to work in a lot of different styles, you know, a lot of people want to explore pluralism that way now, you can never escape your hand. Basically, you have an idea, you have your heart pounds, you have an emotional response, and then this translates it. So that's your connection to what you're making, and you can't escape it, you know. Even though I'd like to paint sometimes like other artists, it's never, you're always going to tell it's mine. Any more questions?
Final burning
Yeah, I have
question.
one last question. It's not
Sure.
related to this thing. I just come up with something. So, what about like a thing that you were talking about, like American culture and European culture, like that nowadays anything is new, so everything is like recycled in a way, like story or history, as you were. So do you think that now the America is like one of the most like important potential like places in the world? Do you think that they are like creating something that has been created already, like in Europe, like in the sense of society or like humanity? I don't know how to. I mean, are you
well, I would say first off that I don't think we're the most important, and I was, you know, growing up in America, like I really don't love my education. So let's see, politically, to sum up my views about America, I've thought about it, and I think two things need to happen. I do not want my country to be the world's police force, and I don't think it's our business to be doing that. And if we spent less on, our military budget, 90% of taxpayer money goes to military budget, and more on education, or more on humanity goals, or more on entrepreneurial business, or more on, endowment for the arts, I think it would be an awesome country. I do. And then, second of all, everyone thinks in America we're taught that it's so great that we separated church and state, with the founding fathers. But if we don't separate corporate and state at this point, nothing's going to change, and it's just going to get worse. So that's me summing up my political views. I think the only thing, spending some time in Europe, I'm not as held to tradition, and I don't know what tradition I would be held to. Like, I'm not a Puritan. I don't really think that feeling guilty about everything is the way I want to live my life. So I'm not going to uphold that traditional value of America so much. What we did with the Native Americans is horrible, and it makes me super, super sad. So I don't want to uphold that tradition. Slavery, I come from the South, I don't want to uphold that tradition. So I might feel a little bit more free to experiment or try something new. I think that is maybe the beauty of American art. But at the same time, maybe we already did that with abstract expressionism, so what's the new American art? I think it's so much more global now anyway, that no one place, we're all connected by internet, we're all connected. I don't know exactly what's going on in China, but I have a fair understanding of the Chinese art world. African photography is hot right now on the market, I don't know. But I have a visual understanding of it, whether I know all the names and all the players and exactly what they're talking about. I have a visual understanding of it all. So it seems much more global to me now. And it may be the best art is trying to connect that, or trying to talk about that, rather than this kind of regionalism or nationalism. Because when I made art about America, it was basically like revolutionary paintings, because I didn't like George Bush. So, I don't know. Not every American's going to make art like that, or should make art like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's got to be much more global.